The crystal glass in my husband's hand caught the light as he stood up. For a brief moment, I thought he was about to say something sweet, maybe thank me for the long nights, or for smiling through the exhaustion. I even sat up a little straighter, waiting for it. But then, that smirk. The one that always made me feel like I was standing on thin ice. "Here's to surviving another year of this marriage circus," he said, swirling the wine. "Who knows how much longer she can keep up with me?" The laughter hit me like a slap. Even his boss joined in. Loud, polished, business lunch laughter, the kind that echoes in marble rooms. "Guess we'll be celebrating your freedom soon, huh?" one of them added. I smiled and let out a small laugh, but it wasn't joy. It was survival. My lips curved upward, but my heart sank lower. My hands trembled under the table, so I clenched them into fists. My wedding ring pressed into my skin, a little gold reminder of promises that now felt like a bad joke. He leaned back, proud of himself, eyes glinting with satisfaction. It wasn't the first time he'd made me the punchline. But that night, something was different. Because when the laughter faded and everyone turned back to their plates, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the wine glass. And for the first time, I didn't see a woman trying to keep her marriage together. I saw a woman breaking in silence, pretending the cracks were character. I smiled, because that's what women do when they're trying not to cry in public. But inside, something sharp and determined whispered, "This is it." He didn't notice. He never did. He just raised his glass again, laughing about promotions and golf trips, completely unaware that the life he was mocking was the same one keeping him afloat. The room grew louder, the air thicker. And me? I grew colder. Every word he spoke pulled me one step further from the woman I used to be. That was the night the switch flipped. That was the night I realized silence isn't grace. It's surrender. I didn't say a word. I just lifted my glass, met his eyes, and smiled. The kind of smile that only looks soft until you understand it's goodbye. He thought I was toasting back. But in my mind, I was already walking out of that restaurant, heels clicking against marble floors, dignity finally waking up from its long, quiet sleep. And, to think, I should have seen the first red flag that day in the coffee shop. Ha! Love makes you blind, until it hurts enough to open your eyes. We met in a coffee shop downtown, one of those cozy places where the smell of roasted beans and vanilla fills every corner. He was charming, confident, the kind of man who seemed to belong everywhere. When he smiled, he made the world feel smaller, like it was just the two of us. Flowers, dinners, long drives with the windows down, it all felt like a movie. And me? I was the woman who finally got her happy ending. Back then, I didn't notice how he always needed to be right. How every compliment came with a shadow. If I achieved something, he'd laugh and say, "Don't get too proud, sweetheart. You're lucky I'm around to keep you grounded." I should have said no right then, but I laughed it off, because love makes you do that, doesn't it? You explain away the pain because the good parts feel like proof that you're loved. He made me believe I was special, that no one else could understand him. And maybe that's how it starts, not with cruelty, but with closeness. So close, you stop noticing the cracks forming beneath you. The first real fight came over nothing. A dinner I was late to. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. He just stared at me like I'd failed a test I didn't know I was taking. Then he smiled and said, "You should really try harder, babe. People are watching." That tone, half teasing, half command, hit harder than any shout could. It stung in a way I couldn't explain. But I convinced myself it was love disguised as pressure. I should have left then. But instead, I apologized. The next time it wasn't a joke. He made fun of my outfit before a work event, said I looked like I was trying too hard. Everyone laughed. I did too, until I saw the way his eyes sparkled. Proud, satisfied. That's when I learned something dangerous. Sometimes, the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who enjoy making you small. Still, I stayed. Because he always followed the hurt with sweetness. Apologies wrapped in gifts. He'd hold my face and whisper, "You know I don't mean it. You just bring out the fire in me." And I'd believe him because I wanted to. because walking away felt harder than staying broken. It took our first anniversary for me to see it. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a mirror that worshipped his ego. That night, as we sat under candlelight, he raised his glass and toasted to my biggest supporter, my reason for winning. I smiled, but inside, something whispered. He wasn't toasting us, he was toasting his own reflection. Our first year of marriage looked perfect. At least, that's what everyone thought. The photos, the vacations, the smiles. Oh, they looked like happiness. But inside, I was slowly disappearing. He loved the spotlight, the compliments, the attention. Every dinner, every event, every weekend, it was all about how we looked to the world. And somehow, I became a background character in my own life. He'd tell stories about our success, how we were a power couple. But deep down, I knew the truth. He just wanted an audience. Not a partner. An audience. I used to stay up late after those fancy parties, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The dresses got prettier, the makeup more perfect, but the woman in the mirror, she looked emptier every day. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes from standing next to someone and feeling invisible. I tried, though. God, I tried. I learned his favorite dishes. I smiled at the right times. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I became whatever version of me he needed for the night. Because I thought that's what love was, sacrifice. But it wasn't love. It was slow erasure. Sometimes I'd walk through the house, this big, echoing house we bought together, and feel like a guest. Everything had to be curated, perfect, spotless. Even my emotions. I wasn't allowed to be tired or sad or messy. Perfection was his drug, and I was his brand ambassador. I started journaling again, secretly, just to remind myself that I was still in there somewhere. Between the lines, I poured out all the words I couldn't say out loud. Sometimes I'd write, I missed the sound of my own laughter. The truth was, I was scared. Not of him yelling or hurting me. No, it was quieter than that. I was scared of the silence. The silence that came after every argument, where he'd just stopped talking to me for days. Like I didn't exist. That kind of coldness doesn't leave bruises, but it freezes your soul. The first time he ignored me for a week, I told myself he just needed space. The second time, I told myself I probably deserved it. By the third time, I stopped making excuses. I just stopped feeling. And that's when something in me started to shift. It wasn't anger yet, not even strength. It was this tiny, trembling spark of awareness whispering, this isn't love anymore. But I stayed. Because leaving felt like failing. And I wasn't ready to admit that I'd built my world around a man who didn't even see me. The day I realized he wasn't my partner anymore was the day his perfect image started to crack. And it all began with one dinner invitation. The invitation came in a thick gold envelope, embossed, elegant, expensive. His company's annual dinner. He left it on the counter, almost like a test. Black tie, he said casually, not even looking up from his phone. As if I didn't already know what that meant, his night, his people, his image. For days, he talked about it like it was the event of the year. New contracts, high-profile guests, investors flying in from New York. I smiled, nodded, played along. But inside, something felt different this time. Maybe I'd finally had enough pretending. That night, I put on my favorite dress, not the one he picked. A soft navy gown that made me feel calm, not flashy. When I walked out of the bedroom, he looked up and frowned. You're wearing that? I smiled. Yes. It's comfortable. He sighed. Comfortable isn't the goal tonight. But I didn't change. We arrived at the hotel ballroom, the lights low and glittering. People smiled when they saw us, the perfect couple. If only they knew. His colleagues shook his hand, slapped his back, praised him like he was some kind of golden boy. And me? I stood there, smiling, holding my glass, listening to the same stories I'd heard 100 times. Every laugh he gave sounded rehearsed. Every compliment felt like a lie. Somewhere between the chatter and the music, I started noticing things. The way he leaned in just a little too close when he talked to another woman. The way his eyes flicked toward me, sharp, like a warning, if I wasn't smiling enough. It was subtle, but it was there. The control. The need to dominate the moment. At one point, I excused myself and went to the restroom. In front of the mirror, I stared at my reflection and whispered, "You look fine." But that wasn't true. I didn't feel fine. I felt invisible. And I think that's when the decision started forming quietly in my heart. Not to leave yet, but to stop caring. When I came back, he was at the bar, laughing loudly with his friends. He looked over and said, "There's my wife, the quiet one. Always watching, never speaking." They laughed. I smiled politely, but my hands trembled around the glass. Then he added, "Don't mind her. She prefers being seen, not heard."
Ouch.
The laughter that followed was sharp and cold. That was the first cut of the night, and it went deep. But I said nothing. Not yet. Because deep down, something inside me whispered,
Wait.
Let him finish digging his own grave. By dessert, he'd hand me the shovel, and I'd bury the last piece of love I had for him. Dinner was served, some overpriced dish I didn't even taste. Everyone laughed, talked, toasted, like they were the stars of some glossy magazine. And I just sat there, watching him hold court like a king. He loved these moments. The attention, the admiration, the way people leaned in when he spoke. I knew that look in his eyes. He was drunk on it. Not on the wine. On himself. His best friend, Mark, clinked his glass and said, "To the man of the hour, the genius who never stops winning." Laughter, applause, the usual. My husband smirked, raised his glass, and stood up. To success and survival. Especially surviving another year of marriage. Everyone chuckled. I froze. He wasn't done. I mean, you all know how it is, when your wife's biggest skill is making Pinterest boards instead of profits. Laughter echoed around the table. But not mine. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass. He went on, enjoying the sound of his own arrogance. Marriage is hard when one partner's chasing dreams and the other's chasing online recipes.
Wow.
That one hit. Mark whistled. Careful, man. You might not survive the ride home. And my husband laughed, loud, proud, careless. Like my dignity was a punchline. Something inside me snapped, but quietly. No shouting, no scene. Just stillness. I looked at him. Really looked. The man I once loved, now just a stranger in an expensive suit. And in that silence, I felt everything all at once. Heartbreak, rage, exhaustion, and freedom. I smiled. Why wait a year? He blinked, confused. I set my glass down gently. Let's end it tonight. The laughter died instantly. Forks froze midair. Even the music in the background seemed to stop. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. But I hadn't. For the first time in years, I'd found it. I stood up slowly, adjusted my shawl, and said, "Thank you all for the dinner." Then I walked out. Calm. Silent. Every step felt lighter than the one before. Outside, the night air hit me like a wave, sharp and cold, but real. For the first time, I could breathe. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew it was away. I walked until my feet hurt, until the lights of the hotel faded behind me. And somewhere between anger and relief, I laughed. Softly. Guess, comfort isn't the goal tonight. The irony wasn't lost on me. That night, he toasted his ego and lost the one person who ever loved him for more than his success. But what I didn't know then was that walking away from him would lead me straight into the life he would one day envy. My own empire. When I walked out of that dinner, I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have my purse, just my car keys, my phone, and whatever strength was left in my bones. I drove with no destination in mind. Streetlights blurred through my tears, and the radio played some old love song that suddenly felt like mockery. How many times had I sung along to that exact song, believing love conquered all? Not tonight. I ended up at a small diner off the highway, the kind that smells like coffee and second chances. I sat there in my gown, mascara smudged, staring at my reflection in the silver napkin holder. I looked like a woman who'd lost everything. But deep down, something whispered, or maybe, you just found yourself again.
Wow.
That hit me harder than the champagne ever did. I ordered pancakes because why not? When your life falls apart, carbs feel like therapy. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, gave me extra syrup and said, "Rough night, honey?" I nodded, smiled weakly, and whispered, "You have no idea." That night, I didn't go home. I checked into a small roadside motel and slept for 14 hours straight. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the blinds, and for the first time in years, there was no tension in my chest. No waiting for his approval. No walking on eggshells. Just quiet. It was strange, though freedom felt heavy. Because once you have it, you realize how much you gave up to please someone who never deserved it. I picked up my phone. Dozens of missed calls. 8 messages. All from him. The first one, "Are you done being dramatic?" The last one, "You'll regret this." Ha! If only he knew. I didn't reply. I deleted every single message and sat on the bed for a long time, just staring at the screen. That small act, deleting his voice from my phone, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Later that afternoon, I drove to my sister's house. She opened the door and froze when she saw me, hair messy, dress wrinkled, eyes swollen. What happened? I took a deep breath and said the only thing I could. I left him.
She didn't ask why.
She just hugged me, tight, like she'd been waiting years for me to finally say those words. That night, lying in her guest room, I felt something I hadn't felt in forever. Peace, and maybe a spark. A quiet thought that whispered, "You're not done yet. You're just getting started." I didn't know it yet, but the same man who mocked me at dinner would soon watch me rise, one bold decision at a time. The morning after I left, everything felt both heavy and strangely light. The air smelled different, freer, cleaner, like it didn't belong to him anymore. But freedom has a price, and mine came wrapped in uncertainty. I had no job, no plan, just a suitcase full of clothes and a heart that was learning how to beat again. My sister, bless her heart, tried to help. She made me coffee, sat with me at the kitchen table, and said, "You can stay here as long as you need." That kindness nearly broke me. I wasn't used to being taken care of. I'd spent years taking care of everyone else. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his words in my head. "She's nowhere near my level." Each time, it hurt a little less and fueled me a little more.
Wow.
Funny how the same words that once shattered you can become the fire that rebuilds you. The next morning, I took a notebook and started writing. Not a plan, not a goal, just thoughts. I wrote about what I loved before him. Reading, design, storytelling, connecting with people. Somewhere between those lines, I realized I'd given up everything that made me me. And then it hit me. If I could help build his success, why couldn't I build my own? That question lingered like a dare. For days, I brainstormed ideas. I wanted something that was mine, built from my heart, not his shadow. Then, one afternoon, as I flipped through my old sketchbook, I found a logo I had drawn years ago, a simple flower blooming through cracks in the pavement. Ha! I remembered thinking back then, someday, that'll be my brand. Maybe someday had finally arrived. I didn't have money, but I had time. And I had courage, small, shaky courage, but it was mine. So I sold my designer handbags, the ones he bought to make me look the part, and used that money to buy a secondhand laptop. That's how it started. One late night, coffee by my side, laptop glowing, fear whispering in one ear, faith in the other. I registered a small business. Nothing fancy, just me creating custom handmade gifts and decor. I called it Rebloom. It felt poetic. Because that's exactly what I was doing, blooming again, right through the cracks he left behind. I posted my first few designs online. At first, no one noticed. No sales. No likes. Nothing. But I kept going. Because this time, I wasn't chasing approval. I was chasing myself. What I didn't know was that my little idea, born out of heartbreak, was about to catch the attention of someone who would change everything. For weeks, nothing happened. I kept posting my handmade pieces, quotes on wood, little frames with stories behind them, and watched the views crawl up to 10, maybe 12. No orders. No messages. Just silence. But I didn't stop. Maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe it was faith, the quiet kind that whispers, keep going. I'd wake up early, help my sister with breakfast, and then spend hours painting, wrapping, taking photos by the window because I couldn't afford proper lighting. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It was me. Then one morning, while sipping my cheap coffee and scrolling through notifications, I saw it. You've made a sale.
Wow.
I just sat there, staring at the screen like it was some kind of miracle. A $28 order. Not much to anyone else, but to me, it felt like the world had just clapped for the first time. I packed that order with trembling hands, tied it with a ribbon, and slipped a handwritten note inside. Made with love by someone who finally believes in herself. Cheesy, maybe, but it felt right. That small sale changed something in me. I wasn't invisible anymore. Someone somewhere saw value in what I made, not what I wore, not who I was married to, but what I created. That day, I worked harder. I posted more designs, learned how to market, watched tutorials late into the night. I started telling small stories behind each product, real emotions, little lessons, quiet reminders. And that's when it happened. A week later, I got an email from a boutique owner in Seattle. She'd stumbled on my page and wrote, "Your designs feel personal. Can we talk about a partnership?" My heart stopped.
Me?
A partnership?
Wow.
We spoke on the phone that evening. Her voice was warm, curious. She said she wanted to stock a few of my pieces in her shop, small quantities to start. I agreed immediately, pretending to sound calm, even though my hands were shaking the whole time. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet, staring at my laptop screen. For the first time, I didn't feel small anymore. I didn't feel like the wife of. I felt like me. I didn't tell my sister right away. I just wanted to hold that joy for myself a little longer. Because deep down, I knew this was more than a sale or a deal. It was proof. Proof that walking away didn't break me. It woke me up. What I didn't know was that word of mouth spreads fast, and the next message I got would shake both my past and my future. Orders started coming in faster than I could pack them. 1, then 5, then 20. Each notification felt like a heartbeat, a reminder that I was alive again, not just existing. I even started humming while I worked, something I hadn't done in years. The house smelled like coffee and paint and possibility. Within a month, the boutique owner reordered twice. Then, another small shop reached out from Denver. They said, "Your story-driven pieces are different. They feel real." That word, real, it stuck with me. Because for the first time in forever, my life finally was. I'd wake up early, tie my hair back, and start my day with purpose. My sister joked that she barely saw me anymore. I told her that was a good sign. Then one morning, I opened my inbox and froze. Subject line. Congratulations on your business. The email address? His assistant's. My stomach twisted. I opened it. The message was short, too polite, too sharp. He wanted to extend his congratulations. He came across your products online. Quite impressive. He said it's nice to see you've found something to keep you busy. Ouch. I sat there staring at the screen, my hands trembling. Keep me busy. That man could turn kindness into a weapon. Wow. For a moment, the old pain flickered back, the insecurity, the self-doubt, the tiny voice that used to ask if I was enough. But this time it didn't stay, because right below that email was another one, from a journalist. She wrote, "I found your story through one of your shop owners. Would you be open to an interview about women rebuilding after loss?" I actually laughed. The irony was too good. One man mocked me, another woman wanted to celebrate me. I typed back instantly, "Yes. I'd love to." The interview went live a week later, a small online magazine feature, nothing huge. But people read it. And they felt it. Hundreds of messages poured in. Women from everywhere.
Moms.
Widows.
Divorced.
Overlooked. Forgotten. They said things like, "Your story gave me courage. You reminded me it's not too late to start again." Reading those words, I realized something powerful. I wasn't just rebuilding my life anymore. I was helping other women rebuild theirs. A week later, the boutique called again. They'd sold out completely. And one of their biggest buyers? A luxury hotel chain that wanted my art in their rooms. The same kind of hotel where he once humiliated me at dinner. The universe sure had a sense of humor. I thought that message from his assistant was the last I'd hear from his world, but fate wasn't done crossing our paths yet. It was a quiet Saturday morning. I was wrapping another set of orders when my sister peeked into the room and said, "You have a visitor." I wasn't expecting anyone. Then I heard his voice. "You've been busy." That tone, smooth, confident, practiced. The same voice that once made me melt, now made my stomach twist. I turned around, and there he was, standing in my workspace, in his tailored suit, smelling like expensive cologne and old memories. He looked around, his eyes scanning every box, every design, every piece of the life I'd built. "So, this is what you've been doing," he said. "Cute." I smiled softly. "It's not cute. It's mine." He tilted his head, pretending to be impressed. I read the article. "Congratulations. You always had potential." Ouch! That word again, potential. The one he used when he didn't want to say talent. I didn't respond. Silence has power. He hated silence. He stuffed his hands in his pockets and said, "Look, I didn't come to fight. I just wanted to see how you were doing." I almost laughed. Now, he cared how I was doing? He kept talking, filling the room with empty politeness. But I saw it, the flicker behind his eyes. The disbelief. The envy. He couldn't stand that I was doing better without him. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. "You know, people still ask about us. They're surprised you moved on so fast." I raised an eyebrow. Fast. It took me years to move on. I just stopped waiting for your permission. He blinked, thrown off by my calmness. "You've changed," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "I just stopped being who you wanted." He didn't like that. His jaw tightened, and he walked closer. "You know, I could help you grow this. Connections, money, marketing. You'd reach higher if we worked together." Wow. That was it, the audacity. The same man who once mocked my dreams now wanted to profit from them. I stepped closer, met his gaze, and said, "You had your chance to build with me. You chose to compete instead. And now you're losing." The silence after that was thick. He didn't know what to say. He looked around again, his face tight, part pride, part regret, part disbelief. Then he forced a small smile. "Well, good for you." And with that, he left. The moment the door closed, I sat down at my desk and exhaled. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from release. The kind that comes when you finally realize the past can't touch you anymore. But life has a way of testing peace, and the test came sooner than I ever expected. For a while, everything was good. Orders kept growing. My name started circulating in small business forums, and I was even invited to speak at a local women's event. It felt unreal, like I was finally living, not just surviving. Maybe that's why I didn't see the storm coming. It started with one email. A hotel manager wrote to say their order shipment hadn't arrived. I checked the tracking. It showed as delivered.
Weird.
Then another email came. Same problem. Then another. Within 3 days, 5 clients said they hadn't received their packages. Panic hit me like cold water. I checked everything, my suppliers, the courier service, even my emails. Everything looked normal, except the invoices. They'd been altered.
Wow.
I froze. Someone had tampered with my shipping records. I called the delivery company. They said all orders had been rerouted last minute. When I asked to whom, The woman on the phone hesitated and said, "It was authorized under your business name by someone named Daniel." Daniel, my ex-husband's logistics manager. My stomach dropped.
Ouch.
That familiar ache, betrayal with a new face. I sat there in silence, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Of course, he still had contacts in the same courier network. This wasn't coincidence.
He was trying to sabotage me.
For a moment, I felt small again. The fear, the helplessness. All the ghosts from our marriage came rushing back. But then something inside me shifted. No, not this time. I took a deep breath, opened my laptop, and started gathering every single receipt, message, and delivery note I had. If he wanted to fight, he picked the wrong woman this time. I spent all night building a report, every shipment, every confirmation, every altered invoice. By dawn, my eyes burned, but my resolve was clear. This wasn't about lost orders anymore. It was about reclaiming my narrative again. That morning, I called the boutique owner who'd first supported me. I explained everything. She listened quietly, then said, "You've come too far to let this stop you. Let me help." Together, we contacted the courier company's regional manager, sent the proof, and requested a full internal audit. 2 days later, I got the call. The rerouted shipments were traced, all redirected to a warehouse registered under his company name. Of course they were. When I heard that, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just smiled, because now I had evidence and a choice. I could either drag him to court or do something smarter. I decided to play his game, but with rules he'd never see coming. I sat there for a long time, staring at the proof. Emails, tracking numbers, delivery receipts, all of it leading back to him. My ex-husband. The same man who once mocked my dreams, now trying to ruin them. The old me would have cried, begged for fairness. But I wasn't her anymore. I printed everything out, neatly organized it into a folder, and slid it into my desk drawer. Then I opened a new page in my notebook and wrote 4 words. Don't react. Outsmart him. That became my mantra. I called a meeting with my boutique partners, calm voice, steady tone. I didn't mention his name. I simply said,
Some orders were tampered with.
I'm investigating. In the meantime, I'll double your next shipment, free of charge. They were shocked, touched. And just like that, loyalty deepened. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who tried to destroy my reputation had just handed me an opportunity to build it stronger. I posted a public note on my page, too. Nothing dramatic, just truth. We've faced a few challenges recently, but every setback is a setup for a comeback. Thank you to everyone who believes in women rebuilding their lives. That post blew up. Hundreds of women shared it. Thousands commented. Stories of resilience, second chances, and support. The more he tried to sabotage me, the more people rooted for me. A week later, I got an unexpected call from a small business conference organizer. She'd read about my setback story and wanted me to speak on a panel about women entrepreneurs. Wow.
Me?
Speaking? I almost said no. Then I thought about that dinner night. How I'd once been invisible in a room full of voices. Not anymore. At the event, I told my story, not with anger, but with grace. I spoke about failure, fear, and starting over. About how the hardest thing I ever did was walk away from the person who convinced me I couldn't succeed without him. When I finished, the room went quiet. Then came the applause. Real, heartfelt, thunderous applause. Afterward, women lined up to talk to me. Some wanted advice. Some just wanted to say thank you. And one woman, a marketing director from a major lifestyle brand, handed me her card and said, "Let's collaborate. Your story deserves a bigger stage." That was the moment I realized he'd created his empire with money. I was building mine with meaning. That night, I sat by my window with a cup of tea, smiling to myself. He played games with power. I played mine with purpose. And I was finally winning. But just when I thought the past was behind me, fate delivered one more twist. In the most unexpected way. Months passed. Life was peaceful, productive, even. My business grew faster than I ever imagined. Partnerships, interviews, collaborations, it was like watching a new version of myself bloom, one I didn't know I could become. I was finally free, not just from him, but from the old version of me who needed his approval to exist. One morning, I got an email from that big lifestyle brand's marketing director. She said, "We're launching a new campaign celebrating women who rebuilt their lives. I want you to be one of the faces."
Wow. I had to read that twice. Me?
The woman who once couldn't even speak up at her own dinner table? Now being asked to represent resilience? Life really has a wicked sense of humor. They flew me out for the campaign shoot, soft lights, cozy setup, my art pieces in the background. They asked me to talk about my story, not the pain, but the power that came after it. I spoke honestly about failure, fear, rediscovery, about how walking away from the wrong person led me straight to my right purpose. The campaign went live. It spread faster than I could process. Thousands of women commented, shared, and wrote messages saying my story gave them hope. And I finally realized the success wasn't about money anymore. It was about meaning. Then one evening, as I was wrapping orders, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello."
A pause.
Then a voice I hadn't heard in months. "Mom." My heart stopped. It was his daughter, my stepdaughter. We hadn't spoken since the divorce. Back then, she was caught in the middle, too young, too confused. Her voice trembled. "Dad's in trouble." Those words hit harder than I expected. I sank into the chair. "What happened?" She said quietly. "His company's under investigation. Something about false invoices, stolen accounts. I don't understand everything. But he's scared, Mom. He's really scared." For a second, I didn't breathe. It felt surreal. The man who once bragged about never losing control, now unraveling. She hesitated. "He asked if you'd talk to him." Ouch. That one cut deep. I looked out the window. The same window where I'd once cried for him, prayed for him, begged the universe to make him love me right. Now he was the one reaching out. I took a deep breath and said, "Sweetheart, tell him I wish him peace, but I don't look back anymore." There was silence on the other end, then a soft, emotional, "I knew you'd say that." When I hung up, I didn't cry. I just smiled. Because closure doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes with silence. I thought that call was the end of our story, but life still had one last surprise. One that would change my future forever. After that phone call, something in me settled. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel triumphant. Just free. Maybe that's what true healing is, when you stop needing closure and start creating your own peace. The next few weeks were a blur of work, orders, meetings,
Travel.
My story had become a symbol, not of pain, but of perseverance. Everywhere I went, women came up to me, sharing their own stories of starting over. And every time, I'd smile and say, "It's never too late to bloom again." Then one afternoon, as I sat in my studio sketching a new design, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a number, it was an email. Subject line, "Thank you." I opened it. It was from his daughter. "Mom, I just wanted you to know. Dad lost almost everything. The company's gone. But he's different now. He's quieter. And last night he showed me something. A small box he kept hidden in his office. Inside was one of your early art pieces, the first one you ever made. The one you left behind." He said it reminded him of the woman he should have believed in. Wow. That message stopped me cold. I remembered that piece. It was called Rebloom. A flower breaking through concrete. I'd made it long before the business, long before the pain, when I still believed love could fix anything. Ouch! I didn't know whether to cry or smile. Her email continued. He asked me to tell you he's sorry. He doesn't expect forgiveness. Just wanted you to know he finally understands. I sat there, staring at the screen, tears spilling down before I could stop them. Not because I missed him, but because life had come full circle. Ha! The man who once mocked my dreams was now holding them in his hands, finally seeing their worth. I wrote back to her, simple and honest. Tell him I'm grateful he found clarity. I wish him peace. Then I leaned back, wiped my tears, and whispered to myself, it's over. Truly over. That night, I took out my old journal, the one filled with all those pages of heartbreak, fear, and loneliness. I flipped to the very first entry and smiled. Then, without a second thought, I tore every page out and threw them into the fireplace. The flames danced high, golden and alive, not like destruction, but like cleansing. Watching those pages burn, I realized something. He had built his world on control. I built mine on courage, and only one of those survives the fire. But even as the ashes faded, life had one last surprise waiting, a message that would open a brand new chapter in my story. A week after I burned those pages, life felt still. Not empty, not sad, just peaceful, like the noise had finally settled. Every morning I'd wake up, make coffee, and sit by the window, the same one I used to cry beside, and just breathe. Freedom, I learned, doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with quiet mornings and no more explaining yourself. Sometimes peace feels strange when you've spent years surviving chaos. Then, one afternoon, as I was checking emails, I saw a message that made my heart skip. Subject line: Partnership Proposal, National Women's Expo 2025. Wow. I opened it and started reading. A woman named Dana, the director of a National Empowerment Expo, had seen my interview and wanted to feature my brand, Rebloom, as one of their spotlight stories. They were gathering women from across the country who had rebuilt their lives after loss, betrayal, or heartbreak. She wrote, "We think your journey could inspire thousands. Would you be interested in sharing it live on stage?" I just sat there, staring at the screen. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from disbelief. Me, the same woman who once couldn't get a word out at a dinner table full of laughter and shame, now being invited to speak on a national stage? Life really does come full circle. I called my sister immediately. She screamed so loud the dog started barking. "You have to do it," she said. I laughed. "You really think people want to hear me talk?" She said, "They already are, you just don't realize it yet." That hit me deep. So I said yes. Over the next few weeks, I poured myself into preparing my speech. Not fancy, not rehearsed, just honest. Every word was pulled from the cracks of my past and molded into something healing. On the day of the expo, I stood backstage, holding my note cards, heart racing. Hundreds of faces waited beyond the curtain. Women of all ages, mothers, grandmothers, daughters, each with their own story. The announcer's voice echoed. "Please welcome the founder of Rebloom, a woman who turned heartbreak into hope." As I stepped on stage, the lights were blinding, but the warmth in the room was real. I looked out and thought, if I can stand here, anyone can. I started to speak. Soft at first, then stronger. And somewhere in the middle, I stopped using the note cards. Because this wasn't a speech anymore. It was a conversation with every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't enough. But when I walked off that stage, someone was waiting for me. Someone whose face I hadn't seen in years. The applause echoed like a heartbeat. As I stepped off stage, the lights dimmed, and all the nerves I'd been holding finally melted away. That feeling, it wasn't pride. It was peace. I handed my note cards to an assistant and exhaled. That's when I saw her, standing near the exit, half smiling, eyes glassy with tears. His daughter. For a moment, the world went quiet. The crowd faded, the noise blurred. It was just her and me. She walked over slowly, clutching something in her hands, a small wooden box. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "Mom, that was beautiful." Hearing her call me that again. Ouch! It cracked something soft inside me. I smiled, reaching out. "You came all this way?" She nodded. "Dad wanted to come, but he didn't think you'd want to see him." She looked down, fidgeting with the box. "He asked me to give you this." I hesitated, then took it. The box was old, carved by hand, one of mine. My breath caught when I opened it. Inside was a folded note and a tiny charm, a golden pendant shaped like a flower growing through stone. My Rebloom logo. That man, always full of contradictions. The note was simple, his handwriting steady but worn. "I built walls. You built roots. You grew where I could not. I'm sorry." For a long time I didn't move. Tears blurred the words, but my heart felt calm. Not angry, not broken, just grateful. I closed the box and said quietly, "Tell him, thank you." She nodded, her own eyes shining. "He's proud of you, Mom. He really is." Huh. Funny how time changes everything. I used to crave those words. Now, I didn't need them, but hearing them still felt like closing a circle I didn't realize was open. We sat together in the hallway for a while, two women tied by a past that hurt them both, but also healed them in ways they didn't expect. She told me about her new job, her plans, her dreams. I told her about Rebloom, about how strength isn't something you find, it's something you grow into. When we finally stood up to say goodbye, she hugged me tight and whispered, "You taught me what strength looks like." I smiled through the tears and said, "No, sweetheart, you found it yourself." As she walked away, I looked down at that little pendant in my hand, the one that once symbolized my rebirth. Now it felt like a promise, a reminder that even the deepest pain can grow into something beautiful. I thought that was the end of my story, but sometimes, when you finally make peace with your past, life rewards you with a brand new beginning. A week after the conference, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Text after text, message after message. "You're trending. Your speech went viral. You have to turn on the news." I thought someone was pranking me. But when I opened my laptop, there it was, my name, my face, and the headline. From betrayal to breakthrough, how one woman built an empire from the ashes of heartache. Wow. That headline, it hit different. I wasn't just a woman who survived anymore. I was the woman who turned her story into a movement. Producers started calling, podcasts, magazines. Everyone wanted to talk to the woman behind Rebloom. At first, I said no. I wasn't ready to relive the past over and over. But something inside me whispered, "This isn't about you anymore." So I said yes. The morning of the interview, I sat in the green room, nerves fluttering like butterflies on espresso. The host, a warm woman named Claire, smiled and said, "You know, your story's given a lot of people hope. But I think they'll want to hear how you did it emotionally." I took a deep breath and smiled. It started the night my husband laughed at me. But it didn't end there. It ended when I stopped laughing at myself.
Claire leaned in.
"You mean when you started believing you were worth more?" I nodded.
Exactly.
You can't rebuild your life until you stop measuring it by someone else's scale. The interview went viral again. Clips of that moment flooded social media. Women started tagging their friends with messages like this, "Read this," and "She's saying what I never could." A few days later, my assistant walked in holding a thick envelope. "You got mail from Oprah's team." I froze. Funny. She shook her head. No. Really? She wants to feature your story in her magazine.
I just sat there, speechless.
That quiet little woman who once cried in her car after a dinner humiliation was now being called a voice for women's reinvention. That night, I sat alone with a cup of tea and thought about every woman who'd ever doubted herself. Every one of us who'd whispered, maybe I'm too old, too tired, too late. And I smiled, whispering to the empty room, it's never too late to be proud of the woman you became. I thought the spotlight would feel like victory, but what happened next reminded me that real power doesn't come from being seen. It comes from what you do with it. The morning air was crisp, golden light spilling through my studio windows. I was finalizing the designs for Rebloom's new Rise collection, pieces inspired by women who rebuilt their lives from pain, when my assistant walked in, looking uneasy. There's someone here to see you, she said quietly. I didn't look up at first. Tell them to email my office. She hesitated. It's Daniel. My hand froze. For a second, the pen slipped right from my fingers. I hadn't heard that name spoken out loud in years. I thought I'd buried it under deadlines, board meetings, and new beginnings. But there it was, the echo of a man I once thought I'd never stop loving. Send him in, I said softly. When he walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. His arrogance was gone, replaced by something fragile. Time had humbled him. He smiled weakly. You've done incredible, Elena. I nodded. Thank you. What brings you here? He paused, taking a deep breath. I saw your interview. You looked happy.
Proud.
I wanted to say I'm sorry. 2 words that used to mean everything. Now, they just floated in the air, soft, harmless, almost unnecessary. You already did, I said quietly. By leaving. He let out a shaky laugh. Fair enough. He glanced around the office, eyes landing on the framed photo of Rebloom's first workshop, a dozen women laughing, creating, healing. You really turned it all into something beautiful. Pain's good fertilizer, I replied. You either grow from it or rot in it. He winced slightly but nodded. I deserve that. Then he reached into his jacket and handed me a folder. This is for you. It's about your daughter. My stomach dropped. What about her? She's been struggling. She's been asking about you. I didn't know how to fix it. That ache returned, the kind that hides behind success. I thought I had outgrown it. Turns out motherhood doesn't expire with distance. You tell her, I started, then stopped, swallowing hard. You tell her she can come see me anytime. No explanations needed. He nodded slowly, looking at the pendant around my neck, the same Rebloom charm his daughter had given me months before. I'm glad you kept it. I didn't keep it for you, I said. I kept it to remember what I survived. He smiled faintly. You always did have the last word. No, I whispered. I just finally found my voice. He left quietly, no tears, no dramatics, just 2 people acknowledging that some endings don't need closure. When the door closed, I thought that was the end. But that knock had awakened something I wasn't expecting, the truth about forgiveness. A few days passed after Daniel's visit. The studio felt quieter, heavier, like the walls were holding their breath. I kept pretending to be busy, but every time I looked at the door, I found myself listening, waiting. Then one afternoon, as the sun dipped low and turned everything gold, there was a gentle knock. Not the hesitant kind, the soft, hopeful kind. I knew that knock. A mother never forgets that rhythm. When I opened the door, there she was, my daughter. Same kind eyes, same stubborn chin, but her shoulders carried a weight that broke my heart. Hey, Mom, she whispered. Those 2 words hit harder than any apology ever could. I smiled through the lump in my throat. Hey, baby. Come in. We stood there for a second, both unsure what to do. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me.
Tight.
Like she was afraid I'd disappear. "I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling. "I didn't understand back then. I thought you left because you stopped caring." I held her face gently. "No, sweetheart. I left because I finally started caring about myself." She laughed softly, wiping her tears. "Dad told me you're building an empire." "Huh?" I chuckled, something like that. "But it's not about money. It's about reminding women they can start over, no matter what they've lost." She nodded slowly. "I get that now. I lost myself for a while, too." "Then it's time to rebloom," I said. She smiled at the word, my word, the one that had saved me. We sat down on the couch, sipping tea and talking like we hadn't in years. About her job, her heartbreak, her dreams. And for the first time in forever, I wasn't giving advice. I was just listening. At one point, she reached for my hand. "Mom, you know what's crazy? Your story helped one of my friends leave a toxic relationship. She said you made her brave enough to walk away." I froze for a moment. My voice, my pain, my story. It had reached her world too. I whispered. "Then maybe that's what all this was for." She smiled through her tears. "You've turned your scars into a map for other women." That line stuck with me.
A map.
Because that's exactly what I wanted Rebloom to be, not a company, but a guide. A light for women who think the road ends after heartbreak. When she left that evening, she hugged me again and said, "You're not just my mom. You're my hero." Ouch. That one went straight to the soul. After she drove away, I stood by the window watching the taillights fade, whispering to myself, "It's never too late to come home." That night, I finally forgave everything, the man, the past, even the version of me who once begged to be seen. And the next morning, life gave me one last surprise I never saw coming. The next morning, I walked into the studio early. The sunrise was painting everything in soft orange and pink, the kind of light that makes even silence feel warm. I brewed a cup of coffee, opened the windows, and just breathed. For the first time in years, there was no noise inside me. No what-ifs. No regrets. Just stillness, the kind that feels like peace. I smiled. That's when my phone buzzed. It was an email from a woman named Ruth. "Dear Elena," it began, "I'm 67 years old. My husband left me after 38 years of marriage. I thought my life was over. Then one night, YouTube suggested your story. I stayed up till 3 a.m. watching every video you made. And for the first time, I didn't cry because I was broken. I cried because I realized I wasn't done yet. Thank you for helping me remember who I was."
Wow.
That one hit deep. I read it again, slowly this time, because those words weren't just hers. They were every woman's. Every single one who'd ever felt invisible, unwanted, or forgotten. That's when I realized I hadn't just built a business. I'd built a bridge. A bridge from pain to power. I walked to the mirror hanging near my desk, the same one that once reflected a woman too scared to start over. Now, it showed a woman who had learned that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just quietly says, "I'm still here." I whispered to my reflection, "You made it." Then I laughed softly. "Huh. And you did it your way." Just then, my assistant peeked in. "Elena, they're waiting for you in the conference room." "Who's they?" I asked. "The foundation directors. They want to fund your new project, the one for women over 50 starting their own businesses." I took a deep breath, grabbed my notebook, and walked out. Each step felt lighter than the last. Not because everything was perfect, but because I finally understood why I'd gone through it all. When I entered the room, a dozen women stood and applauded. But I just smiled and said, "No applause, please. Let's get to work. We've got lives to rebuild." They laughed, and I laughed with them, the kind of laugh that heals. That evening, As the sun set behind the city skyline, I sat by the window with my journal. I wrote just one line. The moment you stop waiting to be chosen is the moment you start to bloom. I closed the journal and looked out at the sky. Bright, endless, full of color. Life had come full circle. So, if you're listening to this wondering if your story is over, it's not. Maybe it's just beginning. Because no matter where you are, no matter what's been lost, it's never too late to be the woman you were meant to be.